So tonight's discussion is really that. It's a discussion, and the reason why is because normally, when I get here, I start pontificating, and I start lecturing, and I start talking, because I have a lot to say in the matter, and it's kind of there's something I'm trying to impress or to bring about, or some issue that I want to tackle from every angle. Tonight, I want to tackle really a dilemma. I want to grapple with a problem, with tension that exists within certain realms of Jewish philosophy and practice. Because normally it's very easy for me to find like a clear-cut solution with a certain problem. There's a flavor, there's a direction, there's a theme that we could follow to try to understand a certain issue. Typically, that's the way it would work. However, when I was researching for this topic, I found that there really is credence to both sides of the argument, which makes it a really good subject matter for discussion. Because there seems to be good arguments on both sides of the issue, on one hand. There seems to be good source material for both sides of the issue, on the other hand, which makes it obviously perplexing. And they don't seem to both, or at least initially, they don't seem to really both be compatible. It seems like it ought to be one or the other, yet we see both. So what I want to do is try to navigate this discussion, or just conduct this discussion to the best of our abilities, and we'll see how far we get, because I have a lot of sources. And typically, when we do this kind of discussion, it's very apt for getting bogged down and getting a debate brewing and not really progressing in the sources. So whichever way it goes, it goes. I don't see my typically more combative friends are not here tonight, I don't think. I guess some of you guys, but... Okay, so what are we talking about? We're talking about big picture motivations, decisions that we have to make in life, actions that we have to take. And on one hand, as believers, we accept the total dominion of God. And we accept that God is in complete control. And we accept that everything that happens to us in our lives, everything that we encounter, all the circumstances are orchestrated by the Almighty. And if so, we're kind of at God's mercy. And we don't really, it's not really about us. It's about whatever God wants to happen to us. That's what happens to us. As Jews, there's a lot of Jewish lingo that we have. Someone wrote to me that in an email, I'll be coming if the Almighty wants me to come. Be'ezus Hashem. Or with the help of heaven. And you should, the Almighty should let you live till 120 years old. Right, etc., etc. We have these mottos, these adages that we say, with the grace of the Almighty, we're able to do X, Y, or Z, and we kind of, we're not really super important. We're just filling in the blanks. On one hand, on the other hand, you look at the Torah and it's telling us what we have to do, and what happens if we don't do it, and it doesn't get done. And we have this idea of personal responsibility of what it means to be a Jew. It means to change the world. It means to change yourself. It means to change your community. It means to work and to progress and to achieve what would have otherwise not been achieved. So which one is it? Is it about what God wants, or is it about what we want? Is it our actions that matter? Or is it what God has in store for us? And that's our kind of divine destiny. That's what's going to happen. So that's really the two issues. And I want to I wrote here a few examples here. Some of them are a little bit hyperbolic, but I'm going to try to convey a point. And then we'll source it also from sources in the Torah. So let me ask you guys a question and tell me if this is ridiculous or not. So let's assume, let's make this supposition, maybe we'll disagree with it, who knows. But let's presuppose that God knows everything and kind of orchestrates or decides everything, oversees everything. Does God determine whether I live or die? Yes or no? What do we say? Well, there's verses. The Almighty makes people live and takes people away. Right? The Almighty giveth and He taketh away. That's what we say. So let me ask you a question. What do I have to lose by being maybe reckless or unhealthy? Or driving without a seatbelt. I don't know if that's reckless or not, Or, I don't know, but driving a motorcycle. Or, I don't know, walking, taking a bike along the highway, leisurely. Or walking into the highway. Or, just leaving kids on a roof without a fence, God forbid. Right? What's this? If the Almighty wants them to live, they'll live. If the Almighty wants them to die, they'll die regardless. Is that a good question? So that seems like maybe that's a little bit immediate. Okay. What about, must I eat super healthy? Or can I say, listen, I'll eat whatever I want to eat, and then if God wants to kill me, let Him kill me. And you know what? A lot of very healthy people die as well. A lot of people that eat unhealthy, quote unquote, they live very long. So it's not really about what you eat, it's about what God decides. So which one is it? Must we watch over our health from the Torah's perspective? We seem to find such indications, but wait a minute. The Almighty one who gives life, and the Almighty the one who takes life away. So which one is it? Other examples. This is, we say in our prayers every day, that the Almighty should give a healing, a complete healing, to someone who's sick. So what are we trying to say? We're trying to say that the Almighty, that there's someone sick, and we're asking the Almighty that they should not be sick and be healthy. Now, who makes someone sick?
Depends. If you get Ebola or you get a cold.
Okay, but working with our assumption that the Almighty is one who oversees whatever happens to us, and even people that could be exposed to things, they won't necessarily get it. But who created the Ebola? Who allowed the Ebola virus to develop? So, but someone gets.
All point back to.
Yeah, I'm saying, don't we say that if someone gets cancer? Well, who gave him cancer? God forbid. It's the Almighty. Is that right? Because once you accept a certain supposition that the Almighty is the one who's in charge, well, if the Almighty's in charge, then what happens? We say, you know what? God, you're thinking maybe to kill this guy. You know what? I have a better idea. Let's make the person live. Is this our fear? Is this God's affair? Right? If God wants someone to live, He'll let them live. And if God wants someone to die, then He'll take them away. We're trying to intervene. We're trying to inject what we want into what's in God's domain, God's sphere. Well, what's the deal? Some more questions here. With regards to one's livelihood. We have some sources in the Torah that talk about the Almighty is the one who decides on Rosh Hashanah how much someone's going to have. Talmud in Bava Basra. On Rosh Hashanah, the Almighty says who's going to be wealthy, how much money are you going to make this year? Okay, so what do you got to lose? Just sit on the couch. Right? It's decided how much you're going to make, and therefore you're going to make it. It'll parachute into your backyard. Why do you have to worry about anything? What will you gain or lose by working harder? I think that this is the kind of tension I think that exists. That on one hand we see some rationale reasons for the idea or for the acceptance of the philosophical approach that God's in total control. Yet clearly we don't behave that way, and we behave like it's we interject into we interject what we think ought to happen into some sort of dialogue with the Almighty. So, which one is it? So, let's kind of dig in a little bit here to some sources that we found.
So your question is more of a free will issue.
Why is that?
Is that kind of what you're going?
Go ahead, proceed.
Well, I mean, do we have free will? Do we not have free will? If we don't have free will, then we just sit on the couch and wait for everything.
So you're doing what are you essentially doing? Break it down for me, Tom.
Well, I don't know.
TJ.
TJ, baby.
The argument is, is if, again, stated, if God is in control, then why do I have to do anything? Right?
So what you're doing is very cleverly expanding the discussion.
Okay.
I mean, you're saying it's not just about the, little things, little decisions, or little behaviors. It's about the life itself. What role does humanity play in life? Right? If we have free will, then we have a purposeful and meaningful role. If we don't have free will, then we're nothing but pawns, and we're purposeless, we're meaningless, we're inconsequential, essentially. Right? Whoever's making decisions, that's where the importance lies. But if we're not at the point of decision making, therefore our actions are not really meaningful for us. Thus, our life has no meaning. So you're essentially expanding. It's like if we're just doing and living the life that the Almighty is tailoring for us, then okay, then what are we? We're nothing. Then the meaning only lies in the hands of he who has an option for not having meaning, right? If success was guaranteed, then success wouldn't mean anything. Just like if you never had a problem with your digestion, it doesn't mean anything to you. Right?
Right.
No one marvels at digestion. Why not? It's the greatest miracle on the planet, if you just think about it for a second. Your body's able to consume food and miraculously process it and digest it and separate all the important things that it needs and get rid of the waste. Like, that's mind-blowing. But why is it not a big deal for us? You know why? Because we've never imagined life without it. Therefore, it's not meaningful to us. So, if there's no option for it to not happen, then it's not meaningful. Does that make sense?
Given obligations along the way too. We can't just sit on the couch for the year. There's things that we are obligated
We need to do, right?
That we have to do.
Okay.
I don't know if there's the necessary reward or compensation that's attached to those. But I don't think we're allowed to just sit and not use what we're already given in form of rational decision-making abilities and social responsibility. And
So what you're saying, Bonnie, is that life does have meaning.
yes,
We have a purpose. We have a role, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. We have a role.
Well,
Okay.
you use it.
So let's creep in here. Let's see if there's any real tension here. Okay. I'm gonna quote you some Talmuds here. In the same book, we know that there's about 63 books in the Talmud. Depends how you count exactly. If you count the Mishnah, there's 63. If you count the Talmud, depends. The Babylonian Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud. Right? But either way, in the last book of the Talmud, the book is called the Book of Nida. Nida is the laws, we're talking about the laws of purity and impurity. Now, it has a narrative as follows. It tells, I'm trying to remember if we ever spoke about this Talmud in this amongst this group. I don't think so. Maybe we have. It tells of an angel whose name is Lila. Anyone knows what Lila means? What does Lila mean? Lila means night, right? Lila means night, right? So there's this angel, it's called Night. When this angel was baby, you would say, "Oh, good night, good night." It's a joke, bad joke. That's why you got to plan. That's why you have to plan your jokes. So, so there's this angel called Lila. Well, what's this angel's role? This angel takes a drop, which is the seed that's going to create a human, and brings the drop in front of God, and presents the drop to God and says, "Will this drop become a man who is strong or weak? Rich or poor? Intelligent or an imbecile? Which one?" That's what this role of this angel is. However, says the Talmud, he does not ask to the Almighty, will this person be righteous or wicked? Why is that? Because all is in the hands of heaven aside from fear of heaven. That's what the Talmud says in the book of Nida, 16b. So, what this is telling us, that there's some sort of angel, I don't know what an angel means, but some sort of spiritual force that asks God, or it's determined, is part of this narrative where they go and get determined before conception, even if the child will be wealthy or poor, intelligent or not so smart, weak, feeble, or strong. However, not their character, not their righteousness. So let me ask you a question. Is it determined from this Talmud, just from this Talmud, is it determined if someone will be wealthy or poor or not? It is.
This one, yes.
That's what it says, right? So if you were quote-unquote lucky, and for whatever reason, the Almighty determined you'll be wealthy, you'll be wealthy. What if the Almighty told you to be poor? You'll be poor. Sucks for you, right? Or intelligent or not intelligent, or, well, you know. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. And we see people that are sickly, and we see people that are very healthy, strong constitutions. We see kids that have two steady streams coming down their noses at all times. No matter how much you wipe, it doesn't go away. And the other kids, it doesn't matter. They eat sand. They chew soil, and that's all they eat. And I have a couple of those. That's all they eat, and they're fine. Rock solid constitutions. Because that's the Almighty made them. So similarly, you would say from this Talmud that that's the way it is with wealth as well. And the Almighty decides who's be wealthy, who's be poor. Okay? Now, let us fast forward to page 70b in the book of Nida. Same book. Now, the fact that it's in the same book should dispel any notions that the authors of the book just lost track of the previous statement. Even if it was at the other end of the Talmud, you study a little bit of Talmud, it becomes absolutely clear. These people don't forget. Absolutely. There's no way they forgot a clear, but certainly if it's only a few pages away, it's 54 pages away. So what does it say? It says as follows. What should a person do and become wealthy? Ma yaseh adam v'yitasher. What does a person need to do to become wealthy? It's a good question, right? A lot of people ask the same question. Well, so it gives us
Tell me.
It gives you a formula. What's the formula? Yarbe b'schora v'yisav itim emuna. Simple. Two things. Do a lot of business, a lot of commerce, and do business with integrity. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, it continues the Talmud. It says, wait a minute. Many tried this and weren't successful. This has been tried. A lot of people tried to do a lot of business, a lot of commerce, and they do business with integrity, and they still didn't become wealthy. So how do you say that this is the formula? This is clearly not the formula. It says more. Rather, no, this is a different formula. You have to ask, you have to seek from He who has all the wealth. And who's that? That's God. Shenemar, as it says, means a verse, Liya Kesev Liya Zavnum Hashem, that God says, I have all the gold and all the silver. Says the Gemara, if so, that it's about prayer and asking God who has all the money, well then why do you tell me to do business, lots of business, and do lots of commerce, and then do business with integrity? Just tell me, just cut to the chase.
If I just have to ask you.
Huh?
If I just have to ask you, you're the one with everything.
Yeah, so says the Gemara, what does it mean? Ha, b'lai ha, lai efshar. One without the other is not possible. One without the other is not possible. Thus, you need to do both. You need to do business, lots of business with integrity on one end. On the other hand, you have to also ask from God. So now there's a few questions. Question number one. Wait a minute. You just told me that if someone is wealthy, it's been predetermined before they prayed, before they did business, before they did commerce, before they're even conceived, that the angel comes and takes the drop because the God, they'll be wealthy or poor. And now you tell me how to become wealthy? Oh, when you're already old enough to do business and commerce, you do business, you do commerce, you do prayer, you do honesty, you do integrity. What's the deal? On the other hand, if God said you're poor, how is it even going to help? How do these two things, how are they compatible? And I think to translate this to our discussion, we see initially on page 16 that it's all about what God determines. And we see on page 70 it's all about what man determines. You know, if someone doesn't pray or doesn't do a lot of business, doesn't do a lot of commerce, sits in the proverbial couch, well, then they won't be wealthy. And if someone does, well, they will be wealthy. So which one is it?
I don't think that the first statement was a statement of God implicitly said that's what you will be.
All is in the hands of heaven aside from fear of heaven. All.
It is.
Monetary, material, physical,
The
intelligent.
tools, not
He knows the end from the beginning, does he not? So he's outside of time, and being outside of time, he can see every decision that you will make in your life, and therefore he sees you before you were born. You knew me before I was in my
But
mother's
TJ,
womb.
there's a big problem with what you're saying. There's an enormous, glaring, and crucial problem. Think about it. Remember the
What?
entire Talmud. Don't skip. You're looking at it too narrowly. Sorry, we made some water here, guys. Remember
Tell
what the
me.
Talmud also said? What was the punchline of the Talmud? Remember?
what was the punchline of the Talmud?
Took the lid off? Yeah. What was the punchline, TJ? What was the punchline?
TJ.
On which one?
On the Talmud.
On which?
On that one. The one that you quoted. Go ahead. What was it?
Well, he said that God determines whether you're going to be rich or poor.
No. The punchline was, all is in the hands of heaven, aside from fear of heaven.
Aside from fear. Right?
Thus, what it's saying is that fear of heaven is not known in the same way. If it was just that God knew because God saw the end, well, God would see also the righteousness
Okay.
or wickedness.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So clearly, it's not just let's just fast forward to the end. It's like reading the last 5 pages of the book before the beginning of the book, and they say, "Oh, I know this guy. I know the villainous." That's what you're proposing, but that's clear it doesn't
Not
work. Because if we're just working backwards, well, then we would work backwards and we would know everything. We would know their righteous and piety and their wickedness.
But could he not know? So God's outside of time. He knows from the beginning to the end to the beginning. He knows back, forward. He knows everything, right? So having that.
No, we don't have that understanding because that's beyond our comprehension. It's an entirely different realm. The fact that God knows, huh?
Is he not outside of
That's
time?
true.
It's not.
That's true. But because he's outside of time, he exists simultaneously in 1266, as much as he exists right now in 2015 and tomorrow on August, I guess that'll be 6th, right?
So could he not also know
Yeah.
every outcome, whether we make a righteous decision or an unrighteous decision
True.
within our life, to see what that outcome would be if we make this decision today?
However, it's not in the hands of heaven.
Right.
But his
he
wealth,
doesn't-
the wealth,
He knows all outcomes.
the wealth is in the hands of heaven, says the Talmud. That is in the hands of heaven. Well, is in the hands of heaven, is in the hands of man.
Well, could he say you'll be wealthy if you do the right things?
Well, it says, I don't know. You tell me. That's my
But
problem.
that's the second part of the Talmud, is saying that God determines you're going to be wealthy or you're going to be poor. Well, guess what? You're going to be wealthy. You could be poor too. Because didn't he tell David? He told King David. He said, "If that was not enough, would I have not given you more?" So David made a mistake. God could have gave him so much more, and would have given him more if he would have just asked for it. But he messed up. So God took that wealth from him. Right? So could it not be the same in this circumstance? If we don't do commerce.
So you want to say
stuff,
like this. You
those
want to
things.
say that I don't like it still, TJ, because you're trying to shoehorn it in, and it doesn't really work necessarily. You're saying that these two are compatible. I don't think they really are.
Make them both.
It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like it's in the hands of heaven. It's the guy, the kid. What do you call him, a kid? He's not even a zygote yet. It's nothing. It's a drop. That we're determining. It's already then. It's determined. It's determined then.
Okay.
So the simplest reconciliation of these two Talmuds is, I think, the opening or I would say the nucleus of really understanding this problem. So I think the answer is like this. The answer is that yes, some people, the angel takes the drop and says the kid will be wealthy, and whatever they do, they'll become wealthy. Whether it means that whether they give lots of effort or minimal effort, whatever they do to touches the gold. Whatever they touch turns into gold. They just can't do wrong. And you meet people in life like this, I'm sure. Some people have met people in life like people that are enormous wealthy and they just hit the lottery multiple times. And, it's just that person is super lucky, or the Almighty just loves them, or it was determined to be wealthy and super wealthy on one hand. Well, what if some guy was given the poor lot of being, right, literally poor? Well, what then? On that, says the Talmud, what does a person do and become wealthy? Even though you may have a roadmap for you, you may have a destiny, you may have a divine, a divine, give me a good word here, guys, determination of your poor, just being poor, and you just weak financials. So what? What do you do and change that? How do you change your destiny in life? Because, like Bonnie said, our life is meaningful. What happens to us, right, is in our hands. And you know what? If someone was determined that they'll be poor, means they'll be poor if they do nothing. However, they could change it. Like the powers of the human is that we have a say in what happens to us. The idea of image of God, what does that mean? Now, I don't know what image means, right? Image of God it's a long conversation. But what it does tell us is that there's some sort of commonality between man and God. So, who determines what happens to me in my life? Well, God, of course. Well, who else determines what happens to me in life?
You do.
Yourself.
Me. Thus, essentially, it's the augmentation of who we really are as a species. We are in entities that we have a commonality with God that even the angels don't have. And that is that we can change our destiny. We matter. We're consequential. Because the Almighty created us in His image. Which means is that the Almighty gives us free will. Which means that the Almighty says that what we do matters.
So we can change what was determined?
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Somebody goes
Well, no,
back
we're
to
not
the
changing
other
what's
foot.
determined. What was determined is... close the door. What was determined was what would have happened unless something changed.
So the way that I always thought of it is, I have a job.
Yeah.
So say God gave me an opportunity to, and I got the job that I have now, right, for example. So if I don't come into work and don't do anything, well, I'm going to lose my job. There's a consequence for that.
Right.
So I have to get up in the morning. I have to come in on time. I have to come in early. I have to work hard. There's action that has to be done with it in order to keep it. So the way that's kind of like how I see it with God gave us the Torah. He gave it to us. It's a responsibility. Now what we do with it is our choice.
That's
You
just
pick-
it.
there's
you
that.
Have
You don't
obligations
do it.
There to
Then, like I said, you don't do it. Then there's a consequence for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's both. It's I don't know.
It's both, but what does that elevate our status to? It elevates our status that we are partners with God. And by the way, I have sources to back this, which is incredible.
We put wheat on the earth, but we make bread.
But it wouldn't grow, exactly. And it wouldn't grow. Because there was no prayer.
There was no man to.
There's no man to sow, exactly.
So,
Right? That is what we are. And it's remarkable that we are partnering with God in determining what happens in the world.
When I saw this topic, the first thing that came to my mind was the joke about the guy who the flood's coming.
Oh.
Oh
Do
yeah.
you remember this?
Yeah.
Or the guy who...
They evacuate, and he's like, no, God will save me. And then the waters come up, and the fire trucks come out. They're like, you need to evacuate. Boat comes. No, I'm good. The helicopter comes. No, I'm good. He dies. I was like, I sent the evacuation team. I sent the boat. I sent the helicopter. You have to take a role in it too. You've got all those
Right.
tools, but you have to take action and act responsibly through this process as well. You can't just sit.
absolutely. I had a similar joke later
sorry,
on,
I'm
chambered.
taking-
No problem. I had the joke. My variant was the guy was looking for a parking spot, and then like it's crazy. He's late for the meeting, whatever. And then the car pulls out. and It's like, okay, I got one. You know, you don't have to worry about it.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Got one. Don't worry.
so like this. So I think that we're kind of we're hitting something, and I want to take it a little deeper because there's more nuance here. I found there's more subtleties here. Let's talk about a story with Joseph. So we know Joseph, very eventful individual, very intriguing adolescent. So he has this conflict with his brothers, and he's sold to Egypt, and then in Egypt he's sold as a slave, and then his master's wife tries to seduce him, and he ends up in prison, and then he's there languishing in prison all alone, until the pharaoh's cupbearer and baker end up as cellmates. Everyone's familiar with the story, and of course he interprets their dreams. And he tells him that in 3 days it'll be Pharaoh's birthday, and Pharaoh's going to hang one of you guys and reinstate the other one. That's the story. And then the last verse of the Parsha, it says, Parsha is by Yeshiv, that is, it says that Joseph tells the butler, or the cupbearer, he says, you should know when you get reinstated, don't forget me. Don't forget me. I'm sitting here myself, and he's been there for years and years and years, languishing for a crime he did not commit. And he tells him, when you get the ear of Pharaoh, put in a good word for me, let him commute my sentence. And the next verse is, it was 2 years later. Well, what happened? He forgot him. And the verse says he didn't remember him and he forgot him. Which means, well, why would it repeat? It means he first, didn't remember it when it was fresh, and then he just forgot it. But either way, we find a very interesting Talmud. It says like this. The reason why Joseph had to have another 2 years of incarceration, and it was 2 years later, was because of the sin that Joseph did. Now, where's the sin that Joseph did? That Joseph relied on the cupbearer. Joseph put his reliance, put his trust in something other than God. And he said to don't tell Pharaoh, tell Pharaoh about me, and don't forget me, right? And bring my cause up to Pharaoh. And by doing that, Joseph sinned, and therefore he had to spend 2 more years in prison. Now, wait a minute. What's the deal?
That doesn't seem very...
It doesn't seem in line with what we would think. We would say is that, you know what, if you have to do whatever you can. So how is it possible that Joseph is being punished for not doing his due diligence? I would think that Joseph did the right thing, don't you think? It seems proper. What would God want you to do? Well, God wants our life to be meaningful. We want to be partners with God and all that, right? On one, that's what we've been saying till now. Yet Joseph is being punished for relying on someone else. So, what's the deal with that?
Maybe it was he was doing one side of that two-part formula. He was doing the business with honesty, but he wasn't between prayer too.
Oh, so you're saying that he should have spoken. He should have spoken to the cupbearer, but in his head he should have also thought about God or prayed to God. Yeah, so it's it seemed like Joseph was also punished. Wasn't that Joseph just didn't earn it? He was punished. So he did something wrong. It wasn't like just suboptimal. It was bad. It's a punishment. 2 years late. 2 years incarceration was. It seems. Yeah, I think that there's room to say what you say. I know that the commentators, when they talk about this, they try to figure out exactly what did Joseph do wrong. I have written down over here in my notes that that Rabbeinu Bachya, the great medieval commentator, he says that of course he relied on God, but he assumed that it was his job to seek a solution. So essentially, he relied on God for kind of actualizing, or at least for overseeing his redemption. But he said, you know what? Let me also get this guy involved because maybe this will be the path that God will use. When Joseph should have said, God will find a path. There's there's lots of ways for God. God doesn't need your direction to show, to try to illuminate the way like they do in airplanes. How are you going to get out? God knows how to take you out. But which seems to maybe fly in the face a little bit about what we've been saying till now. And that is that, no, you have to try to navigate yourself a place. So what's the deal? Additionally, you guys, another example of this. See what you think about this. This is from the Mishnah and the Talmud in Sota. Sota is likewise a book in the Talmud. And it's what happens in a case of a suspected adultery. And it mentions at the end, there's an entire laundry list of things that happened once certain milestones were met. So, for example, it says when Rebbe died. Who's Rebbe? Rebbe's the rabbi. Well, which rabbi? There's lots of rabbis. Well, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Excellent. Rabbi Judah the Prince. Whenever you see in any Talmudic or Mishnaic literature the word Rebbe, rabbi, unless it's a pronoun in a conversation, it's referring to one rabbi. Why? The rabbi of the entire Jewish people. Because the role of Rabbi Judah the Prince was so significant in saving the Jewish people that the Jewish people collectively adopted him as the official rabbi of the Jewish people. So what does it say? By the way, he was one who organized the Mishnah. What it says is that when he died, there was no longer true humility. When he died, true humility was abolished. Why? Because he was the last one who had true humility. Milestone, what happened? It also says, it gives a bunch of examples. When this person died, that happened. Right? When this person died, that happened. Incidentally, the Talmud has a problem. It says, one of the rabbis said, how could you say that when Rebbe died, humility ceased, but I'm still around?
Yeah. Ouch.
That's what the Gemara says. So, which we would perhaps think is contrary to humility. But maybe we're wrong. Maybe our interpretation of humility is wrong. Even though some of the commentators do mention this point that, okay, saying that you're the most humble person around or that you're a truly humble person maybe is not a humble thing. But he clearly didn't think so. And he's not just an after. It's not a joke. It's not like this is the comics section of the Talmud. So we may have to re-examine what humility actually means. But either way, what it says is like this. It says, when the temple was destroyed, they were no longer men of complete faith. So if you say today, I'm a man of complete faith in God, you know what I say? I say the Talmud says, no, you're not. You're maybe partial faith. But no one has complete faith. Why? Because the Talmud says, when the temple is destroyed, there's no longer, at that point in time, there's been a degradation in kind of the quality or the nature of the Jewish character, and therefore there's no longer people of complete faith. Now, should you ask the question, well, quantify that. What does it mean complete faith? What does it mean partial faith? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a man of complete faith? What does it mean to be a man of partial faith? What's the difference? Says the Talmud, a person who has complete faith is someone who has bread in his basket today and says, what am I going to eat tomorrow? That's a man of complete faith. And those kind of people that have such total faith in God that they have food for today and they don't even say what I'm going to eat tomorrow. They don't even think about it. What am I going to eat tomorrow? What do you mean? I have food today. I don't have to worry about tomorrow. I'm not hungry now. If you're not hungry now, what do you have to worry about anything in the future? That's a man of complete faith. And anyone that has breakfast, has $0 in the bank account, has 0 assets, and has no lunch, and is worried slightly, what am I going to eat? What am I going to feed my kids? Right? That worry is a sign of a lack of faith, says the Talmud. Now, well, what does that tell us? That seems to once again be in line of the fact, that Joseph is someone who maybe didn't have complete faith. Because he was worried about what's going to be in the future. What do you mean, what are you worried about? We have God to rely on. What are you worried about? That's what it seems like. On the other hand, what else do we see? We see on one hand that ideally, if you have food today, you shouldn't worry about what's going to be tomorrow. That's what we see. What else do we see from this Talmud? So if someone worries about what they're going to eat tomorrow, if they have no food for tomorrow, just food for today, they're not men of complete faith. But what else do we see? You know what else we see? We see that such people disappeared when the temple was destroyed. So what we see is that, yes, there's this level of faith that exists, but it ain't for us. And for us, right, we're not held to that standard. And we're not expected to have that standard. And that level of faith is not indeed in the requirements for our.
This is like a dichotomy, right? Because you can't. If you're saying that, if the Talmud saying that, even having that personal concern for one's next meal, that's kind of exactly what we were saying before, in that you have to employ some of your own faculties to make your own way in the world.
So you have food for tomorrow.
Yeah.
So you go to work, so you get paid, X amount of times in a month. So
You're trying to make an argument?
No, yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
So
not as an argument, but I'm just.
So no, so
It's not an argument. It just sounds like we're saying both
It's like
sides of it.
I think we can become irresponsible.
huh?
I mean, I think it's kind of.
That's what you think.
Yeah. But
Okay, but then that's what I would think as well. And that's probably what a lot of people have thought post the temple. But there is this idea, and it did exist at one point in time, that the men of faith, they wouldn't worry about what would happen tomorrow. That's what it says. There were such people.
So, but our thought is, what you're saying is, I have to go to work because I got to make money,
Right. So
right? But should we not go to work for the sake of heaven? Because we go just because God gave us the job. God gave us the faculty, the ability, the strength to do it. So just go to work for that. Don't worry about the money. The money will come. God will give it to you, whether you're working for a paycheck or not, right? But at the same time, you're not going. You shouldn't have your mind on the thought of going to work because I'm earning money. Your thought should be, I'm going to work to please Hashem because He gave me this job. And therefore, more faith comes in because I'm going to work for Him. I mean,
Well, I need a different job then.
right?
If I need to be front and center of my mind when I'm going to the office.
But
yeah.
so it kind of goes back to that's the complete faith is to just say, I do everything that I do for the sake of heaven, and I don't worry about anything else. Therefore, God will.
I want to tell you guys another story here. I got another story for you. So there is this Mishnah in the book Chapters of the Fathers that says if there is no flour, there is no Torah. What does that mean? You don't have flour, you don't have Torah. Flour is spelled Flour.
Yeah, because that's my ask.
There's
Talking
It was
about.
flour. Yeah.
no flour, there's no Torah.
If there's no flour, there's no Torah. That's what it says.
So wheat feeds
So
the
when it-
cow to get the hive to make the Torah.
No, well, the simple understanding is if you don't have food, you can't study.
Because you're worried about that.
That's a simple understanding, right? If you don't have food, you can't study. Who could study if your stomach's growling? If you're hunger? Okay, how could you study? That's the simple understanding. However, there's a big question on the Mishnah. What should it have said? If you don't have,
Torah, you don't have flour.
Well, it actually does say that, but
Does?
but it says you don't have flour, you don't have Torah. What it should have said is if you don't have
Bread.
booyah, if you don't have bread, you have no Torah. If you don't have food, you have no Torah. Why does it say no flour? So I once said a Dvar Torah that, what does it mean someone has flour? It means that they have bread for today and flour for tomorrow. So I think what the Mishnah is actually saying is that if you do not have some degree of peace of mind, not only for today's meal, but also for tomorrow's meal, you can't study Torah. Hi. Yeah, of course. That's what I think that the Talmud is saying, the Mishnah is saying, and I think what it's telling us is that if you do not have tomorrow's meal in place, then you're not going to be able to study Torah today. Now, what about men of complete faith? To them, if they had food today, they're good to go. They don't have to worry about tomorrow. But for us, I'm not talking to men of complete faith. No offense to anyone present. But present company is not men of complete faith. So says the Talmud. Therefore, for us, what's demanded of us? What's demanded of us is partial faith. Well, what does that mean? Where is the point where my faith takes over? To what point must I worry? And to what point at what point must I say, that's God's responsibility? Men of complete faith, what happened? What happens to men of complete faith? That's someone who says, I have food right now. Why am I even thinking about what's going to be later on? Well, you're going to be hungry. So what? Let that be God's headache. A man of complete faith is someone who is able to unload or offload all of his physical needs and necessities to God. Outsource it.
So when we worry, we take that upon ourselves.
When we worry, when we're not in partial faith, we say, you know what? I'm worried about that myself. What's going to be down the line? What's going to be with my kids' college tuition, fund, retirement?
So you're telling God, I'll take care of it?
Maybe today, we're at the point that we need to worry about what's going to be when we're 73 years old. But what's happened afterwards? Well, that we rely on God. You can't make all these plans. Well, that we rely on God. My point is that there's some sort of scale here. That for us to rely on God is also important. However, would you like to sit down? Sorry. Earlier. We also have to rely on God.
I might have to leave. So
It's okay, no problem.
my husband called.
We also have to rely on God. However, do we have to rely on God entirely? That's not demanded of us. We're not at that level. Right? Those kind of people don't exist anymore. So where is the point where we're going to stop relying on ourselves or other factors and we're going to start relying on God?
Things you can't control.
I don't know, man. I don't know what it is, but there's some sort of level where is this demarcation zone or this demilitarized zone where my reliance on my own factors that I can control or factors that I can manipulate, they stop. And then I say, like, you know what? From then on, I can let God worry about that. Something so remote, like, what's going to be, I don't know, in 10 years from now financially. Like that, okay, that's so far down the line. Who knows what's going to, I have food for 10 years. I'm going to worry what's going to be in 10 and a half years? No, I got food for 10 years. I'm good to go. Right? Afterwards, let the Almighty take care of it. Yeah? So there is this point at which my self-reliance, right, allows for God to take over. And that is how you would evaluate my faith. My faith, every individual's faith, is the point at which they allow God to be in control. So essentially, what makes this such a fascinating discussion is that it's not clear-cut, cut and dried in any way. It's entirely dependent on who you are as an individual. For Joseph, the great individual that he was, for him, he should have been a man of complete faith. A man of complete faith does not worry at all about anything. No worries. You don't have food for tomorrow? Not worried. Well, why not? What do you get for your kids? I don't know. Whatever God's going to give me. That level of faith, if you actually feel like that, if you actually behave like that, if you're able to do it, great. You're a man of complete faith. You realize that the Almighty is really tending to you on an individual level, one-on-one. If you have any hesitations, well, you're not a man of complete faith. If you feel any palpitations about that, well, then that's obviously you're not holding there. You're worried about it. If you're worried about it, you're not relying on God. If you're not relying on God, then you're not your faith is not complete, and that's not the worst thing in the world. But for Joseph, for him to try to calculate what's going to be tomorrow when this guy gets reinstated, and how to try to manipulate the situation in ways that I can maybe foresee, well, that's an act of lack of faith. And for Joseph, on his level, he should have had complete faith. He didn't have complete faith, he gets punished. So essentially, I think that the true answer to this problem is that it's not really one entity. It's not really one thing. Yes, in life, we're going to partner with God in what happens. What happens to us as individuals, what happens to our families, what happens to the world. It's going to be some sort of mix of what God wants and what we do or what we bring about. And that's going to be entirely in areas of spirituality, but also in areas of physicality and materialism. There's going to be a point in which we're going to work towards, we're going to put in our effort, we're going to do our due diligence, etc. We're going to put in the long hours, and then there's a point in which God's going to take over. And the greater the person is, right, that's reflected in how much reliance they have on God. Now, I want to point out here, I mentioned this, I guess, kind of in the course of what I said. It's a very important point to stress. Some people, right, when they don't have the proverbial food for tomorrow, they say, we'll rely on God. You get this a lot. I've seen a lot of this. I don't know if you have. If you haven't, I know a lot of people I can introduce you to. Rely on God. Now, really, they're not relying on God. It's just a religious crutch, so to speak. Well, it's not really relying on God. If you're relying on God, you would be totally calm, as if you have $100 million in your bank account. That's how calm you have to be, because you're relying. It's done. It's taken care of. If you are so nervous, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Okay, we're relying on God. Okay, fine, but what are we going to do? That's not really relying on God. If you feel like, in any way, this is on your shoulders, then you're obviously not relying on God. And then your faith is not complete. Nothing wrong with that necessarily. But don't go and tout yourself as relying on God, when in reality you're relying on yourself. It's just that you don't have a solution, so you say, okay, let God take care of it. But I'm so worried. Because if it still weighs you down, it's clearly on your shoulders as well. I want to give you guys a passage here that I took out of the chinuch. If y'all remember, in this very same room, we spoke about the chinuch the chinuch is one of the great commentators of the medieval ages. And he wrote a book of the 613 mitzvahs. The word chinuch means education in Hebrew. Thus, the Ministry of Education in Israel is called Misrad HaChinuch. When you want to educate your children, you want to give them good chinuch. So the book called the Chinuch, or the Chinuch, that book has in it the collection of all the mitzvahs, and enumerates all the mitzvahs, but it also gives you a flavor and feeling and philosophy and reasons behind the mitzvah. Now, there's a mitzvah in the book of Deuteronomy, we'll read it in a couple of weeks, that everyone should make a fence around the roof. If you have a roof, make sure there's a fence there. Why? Because if you don't have a fence, someone's going to fall over, right? Right?
If someone's on the roof,
Yes, for you.
potentially.
Well, I'm saying in an apartment building. So it says like this. And he really grapples with this problem. Even though the Almighty supervises us personally. He talks about this a lot, the idea of individual supervision, hashgacha pratit. And all that happens to us, good or bad, is a result of His decree and command. So on one hand, we're just totally at the mercy of the Almighty. And as our sages taught, it quotes the famous Talmud in the book of Chulin. A person cannot bend his finger from below unless it is thus decreed from above. Something as simple as bending your finger, that you can't do it on your own. You need God's help. Huh? Unless a person cannot bend his finger from below, which means on planet Earth, unless it's thus decreed from above. Still, a person must guard himself from common happenings of the world. Even though we're at the mercy of the Almighty, we got to put up the fence. Why? For the Almighty created his world and built it on the foundations of the pillars of nature. And He decreed that fire combusts and water extinguishes a flame. And likewise, nature demands that if a large boulder falls on the head of a man, that his head must be smashed. Or if a person falls off a roof of a building, that he will die. So the Almighty it seems like he created a way, an order of how the world works. And the world works when someone falls off a building, right, they're going to die. The Almighty also endowed the bodies of men and blew into their nostrils the souls of life capable of intelligence to guard the body from all danger. So when you know that there's hazardous dangers, you avoid them. And placed both the body and soul in the world, and they ought to direct him and cause upon them actions. And because the Almighty subjugated the body of man to nature, therefore He demanded man to protect from accidents. So He's explaining this mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to put the seatbelt on, and to eat healthy, and to put the fence around the roof, etc. Because you have to protect yourself from accidents. Otherwise, what happens if you don't? Nature, to whom He is subjected, who's He? Mankind, will do as per the rules, as per its rules, if He does not protect himself from him. However, this is what I wanted to get to. There will be a select few that, due to their piety and cleaving to the Almighty's ways, the King desires them. These are the great righteous from yesteryear, men of renown, like our great and holy forefathers, and many of their descendants who came afterwards, like Daniel, Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah, to whom He subjected nature to them. The paradigm is the opposite. Nature is subjected to them. In their beginning, they too were subjected to nature. But at their ends, due to the greatness of the ascension of their soul, it was reversed, and they became masters over nature. As we know, with Abraham, famous story of the Midrash, our forefather was cast into a fiery furnace and was not injured, and the four pious ones that we mentioned were thrown into a pit of fire, and their hair was not singed. However, as a result of their sin, the majority of people do not merit this great level, and therefore the Torah commands us to guard our dwellings and places to prevent negligent death. He gives more examples. We have to prepare ourselves for battle. Why do you have to fight a war? Who needs an army? If we're going to win, we're going to win. We're going to lose, we're going to lose. Well, no, because we're not perfect. So what it's essentially telling us is the point that we kind of concluded a little bit earlier. And that is that, yes, it's possible for someone to live on the realm of God being in total control. But they have to earn it. How do you earn it? By growing. By having your soul grow. When your soul grows and you become closer to the Almighty, then you get the greater faith, and the greater faith, then you actually earn the greater kind of reality. So when the person who was a man of complete faith, who had food today, didn't have food for tomorrow, was not worried, well, what happened tomorrow? What would happen the next day? God took care of him. Because they relied on God completely, that's why God completely took care of them. And now if you rely on yourself and on God partially, well, God will partially take care of you. Exactly what you put in, you take out.
Right, so if we worry of something, then we're taking that to ourselves to say we'll take care of it. And if we just don't worry about it, that's that's saying that God's going to take care of it.
Well, no, it's not saying that. If we live that, right, then God will actually take care of us completely. Now, I want to say a cool story here. There was a guy. These notes for next time here. There was a individual who came to Rabbi Israel Salanter in the 1800s, and he said to him, "I'm very poor, and I want the Almighty to give me to take care of me. The Almighty loves me, let him take care of me. And how am I going to do it? I'm going to buy a lottery ticket, and I want to have complete faith. I'm going to have complete faith. Will I win the lottery?" Rabbi says, "You know what? If you have complete faith in God, you win the lottery. 100%. If you have complete faith that the Almighty will make this the winning ticket, 100%, no doubts, then you'll win it." The guy was like, "Okay, fine. I have complete faith." And the next day, Rabbi Salanter came over to him and said, "You know what? The winning ticket, I'd like to buy it. Can I buy it for half the jackpot?" The guy says, "It's a $1 jackpot's, I don't know, $500,000. It's only, I bought it for $1. Of course I'll sell it to you." It's like, you don't really believe that it's worth $500,000. You don't really believe it's a winning ticket. You don't really believe in it, so it won't be the winning ticket. Thus, if we have complete faith in the Almighty, then the Almighty will be completely in charge of us, and we don't have to worry about anything. We're a man of complete faith, and therefore, what happens tomorrow? We get the food. Well, how does it work? Well, God tends to us individually. You have to worry. God is if your dad was a billionaire, would you be worried what you're going to eat tomorrow? Let's say you had $0 in your account, but your dad's a billionaire. You worried about what you're going to eat tomorrow?
No.
Why not? You have $0 in your account. Well, your dad's a billionaire. Okay, let's say you have $0 in your account today. Your dad, the Almighty, is not a billionaire, he's a trillionaire. You can worry about what you're going to eat tomorrow?
No.
Why would you worry about what you're going to eat tomorrow? Because we don't really believe that God's a billionaire or a trillionaire. We don't really, 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 really believe it. Or we don't really believe that he's our father. Whatever it is, there's some sort of lapse in faith. We don't really, 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 really believe it. Right? We don't have complete faith. Therefore, if we don't have food for tomorrow, we're freaking out. No son of a billionaire freaks out. Of a human billionaire, that is. Freaks out if they have no money in their account and no food for tomorrow prepared. We only freak out because we don't really believe. And our lapse of faith means that, okay, God doesn't treat us really like a billionaire dad. Thus, to the degree in which we're able to achieve that level of faith, that's the degree of reality that God plays a role in what happens to us. It's all commensurate to what we put into it. Now, some more sources here. Got a whole bunch more sources.
But then what about
Go ahead.
those people who just can't do wrong?
What do you mean something wrong?
Where, what if it's not because they have faith, it's just, even if they don't try hard and they
What, so that people that... Okay, so...
to always be fine, wealthy.
Yeah, so we have people like that. And the question is that better off? Are they better off or not? I think that we have a corollary. What's the corollary? The corollary is... What's the doppelganger? Remember that whole doppelganger craze?
Yeah.
What's a doppelganger? The doppelganger is, in Genesis, the serpent. What's the serpent going to eat? Anyone remembers? He eats the dust. He is essentially given a guarantee that he'll never, ever, 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 ever go hungry. Because there's no place he can't find dust. He always gravity guarantees dust. So that seems like a blessing, don't you think? Seems like a blessing. Yet it's not really a blessing because, well, you don't have the opportunity to have that other way of achieving wealth, and that would be via actually getting God involved and having a relationship. But even let's assume that someone is just wealthy by it just happens, you know, that doesn't guarantee that they cannot have a relationship with God.
It's going to be more difficult, though, wouldn't
No, because the relationship with God could be entirely in spiritual matters. Or they could you could also have faith that whatever happens to them is still ordained by God, and it's just, you know, it's just natural. You don't have to work really hard. Okay, fine, great, and you're thankful and appreciative of that, and you recognize that it's all from God, and then wonderful. I want to talk to you later a little bit about there's some more sources. I want to skip some sources here because I don't want. This is one thing I really like here. You know, let me give you I'll give you some more sources here. The Talmud in Brachos. Brachos is the very first of the books of the Talmud, and it talks about Brachos. What does Brachos mean? Brachos means blessings. So it's like the book discusses blessings and prayer, amongst other things. And it says, it is not the way of a man to seek medical help. Someone's sick, it's improper for them to go to the doctor. Right? Why? Because they might not take care of you. Just that they so behaved. Because people relied on doctors, that's why they need to go to the doctors and can't rely on God. It's the same principle we said till now. Means, ideally, if we all had complete faith, then we wouldn't need to go to the doctor. Why? Because we have complete faith. Right? We're living at this higher level that God takes care of our breakfast tomorrow. Right? The Almighty God is the billionaire dad and the one who has the complete control of our health. Who needs to go to the doctor? Why do you need to go to the doctor? But we decided to go to the doctors. Therefore, we kind of kicked God out of the equation, and therefore we need to go to the doctors. Because we don't get treated in that same manner. And that's what the Talmud initially says. And then Abaye comments. He quotes from Rabbi Yishmael that don't say that we shouldn't go to the doctors. Why? Because the verse says, "And he shall surely heal." And from there, the Torah is telling us that a doctor has permission to administer medicine. So we say that it's as if the Torah is telling us that we ought to go to the doctor. So the question is, what's the ideal? Should we go to the doctor or not? So on one hand, we have one verse that says we should go to the doctor, according to Rabbi Yishmael. And just remember that name. I just said that name because it's very important to remember for the next source. Rabbi Ishmael says, go to the doctor, that's the will of God. On the other hand, there's other thing with other position that says, no, don't go. The only reason why we need to go to the doctor is because we decided to go to the doctor. If we just relied completely on God, then we don't need to go to the doctor. We caused this hassle of Obamacare for ourselves. Okay, sorry. Let us go down that wormhole and emerge 3 hours later. And then we find an additional Talmud. This is one of probably the crucial Talmuds that discuss this issue. And it says as follows. And we read in the Shema, V'asafta deganecha, you're going to gather in your grain. You're going to harvest your grain. Now, the Torah doesn't say extra words, and the Talmud says, wait a minute, what's the point of telling us you're going to gather in your grain? Well, what else are you going to leave it out there? You're going to bring home your shopping bags, take them out of your trunk. You know that when you make a big purchase at the grocery store, and you did all the work and did all the aisles, and you want someone else to take the bags in. But no one ever considers they should leave the bags outside, right? Says the Torah, you should gather in your bags. Gather in your grain. What does that mean? Of course you gather in your grain. When you leave it outside? Let it wither away? Why should you gather in the grains? So says the Talmud, the purpose for it saying is that what happens if someone is busy in the field? What do they neglect? What could they potentially neglect? If they're in the field, they neglect their Torah study. And we know that we cannot neglect our Torah study. So what is it? Should we have to study Torah? We have to take in the grain. So we say that even though we can't neglect the Torah study, we still have to work in the field. Gather in your grain. Don't say, I'm going to sit and study Torah, and the grain and the food and the livelihood will take care of itself. That you can't say. Gather your grain. This seems very much like Rabbi Ishmael, right? Go to the doctor. Gather your grain. Even has the same sing song. Gather your grain. Be a great name for a band. And who says that, by the way? These are the words of Rabbi Ishmael. So we see in two parts of the Talmud, Rabbi Ishmael says this kind of the same thing. He says, the Torah says, go to the doctor. The Torah says, gather your grain. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, someone comes and disagrees, and what does he say? If a person plows during the time for plowing, and plants during the season of planting, and harvests during the harvest season, and grinds in grinding season, and winnows during the time of the wind, what will become of the Torah? So Rabbi Shimon says, wait a minute. Okay, well, gather. You want to gather. You say we should gather the grain. Well, what about everything else that goes into being a farmer? You're busy the entire year.
Right, there's always something.
You're plowing, and then you're planting, and then you're harvesting, you're grinding, and you're winnowing. You're busy the whole time. So when are you going to study Torah? Rather, what you should do when Israel is doing the will of the Almighty, then their work is done by others. Study Torah. Don't worry about it. Let the work be done by others. You don't have to be in charge of the work. Someone else will take care of it. Rely on God. You're the billionaire dad. Are you worried about what you're going to eat tomorrow? You're trying to strap together, shake out couch cushions to try to find cash for tomorrow's meal? Don't worry about it. The Almighty will take care of you. However, when Israel is not doing the will of the Almighty, then the work is done by themselves, and additionally, the work of others is done by them. Thus, we see once again a disagreement. Rabbi Ishmael says both times that you should, seems like a little bit more pragmatically, at least from our perspective, that you have to go to the doctor and, gather in your grains. And Rabbi Shimon says, no, don't worry about it. Study Torah, pray, and food. What do you worry about food? Let the Almighty take care of it. Now, let us learn a little bit more about Rabbi Shimon. Who knows? Famous episode of Rabbi Shimon. What do we know about Rabbi Shimon? Anyone knows? The famous Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Anyone heard that name before?
Me.
Yes. What do we know about him? Huh?
In the Talmud.
Okay. Well, what about him? Any details?
He was discussing stuff.
Anyone knows any details of his life? So he was someone that was persecuted and was teaching Torah at a time when the Romans said don't teach Torah, and he ended up hiding. And who knows what? Let's read the story here. Very long story here, huh? Well, no, I'm sorry. He wasn't hiding. Sorry, what did it say? I forgot. I'm getting mixed up. I think I mixed up last time as well. There was a discussion between some of the rabbis about the Romans. And one of the rabbis said, how beautiful are the actions of the Romans. They established marketplaces, and they built bridges, and they established public bathhouses. They're such a wonderful people. As you may well know, the Jews had a very tortured relationship with the Romans. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Yehuda says they're wonderful. Rabbi Yossi, he was quiet. He didn't say anything. And what did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai say? He said everything they didn't do for our benefit, they did it for themselves. They established marketplaces to make brothels. They established bathhouses to luxuriate themselves. And they established bridges. They built bridges to collect taxes. They're not benefiting us at all. So there was one guy who heard it, and he went and he would tattletale to the Romans. And the Romans said as follows: Rabbi Yehuda, the first rabbi who spoke in praise of the Romans, he should have his status upgraded, and he became like the speaker of the house of the Jewish people. Basically, he was in charge. Rabbi Yossi, who was quiet, he should be exiled, sent to Tzipori, sent him north. And Rabbi Shimon, who embarrassed the Romans, he's going to be executed. So what happened? They went and they hid. First they were hiding in one place. There was some woman giving them food every day. And then they were worried. They said, well, what if we get caught? They went and they hid in a cave. And they wore their clothes. This is what the Talmud described what they did in the times like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Lazar. They submerged themselves in sand, and they only wore their clothing on Shabbat. And it says that there was a miracle, that a tree sprouted right outside their cave, a carob tree, and they ate carobs. And also, a stream of water came right by the cave. So they had food, and then they had drink, and that's how they sustained themselves in the cave for 12 years. And what happens after 12 years? They got the information, also in a miraculous fashion, that those that wanted to kill you, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, they are no longer coming after you to come out. He comes out. There's a whole fiasco. What happens? He comes out after being studying himself in a cave with a son, with him and his son. I've been studying in a cave for 12 years. They come out and they see people like working on their fields and like not thinking about God, and like everywhere Rabbi Shimon looks, like there's a fire. Either way, that's Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Shimon is someone who actually lived the life that he espoused. He was someone who actually demonstrated, I'm going to stay in a cave. Well, there's no food. You're going to die in a week. No, I'm not. I'm the son of a billionaire. I'm a man of complete faith. Right? The Almighty will take care of me. I'm not even worried. And you know what? The next morning he woke up and he went out for breakfast. And he wasn't shocked that there was a tree there. Of course there's a tree there. When you wake up in the morning and there's... Well, not you, but... I don't put pressure on anyone here. But if someone were to wake up in the morning and find a bowl of cereal... Let's not overshoot what we could ask for breakfast, right? I was going to say pancakes. If you find a bowl of cereal in your closet, are you shocked?
It's still there. Nobody ate it.
Oh, it's strange.
No, you're not shocked because of course. You wake up in the morning, it's there. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai came out and he saw a carob tree. Was he shocked? No. He relied on God. And then he says, there are people that are going to spend their time working for food. Why do you work for food? Rely on God. You don't have to worry about it. And Rabbi Yishmael, who argues with him, I bet he knows the story. And I'm sure he agrees that this is possible. But that's not who most people are. And in fact, the Talmud concludes their original argument of what to do should you gather the grain or not, and it says many people did like Rabbi Yishmael and succeeded. However, many people did like Rabbi Shimon and did not succeed. Thus, the only person that could say, I'm going to not worry about what I'm going to eat, and not worry about what I'm going to eat tomorrow, I'm not worried about what I'm going to eat by not going to the field, not worried about what I'm going to eat by being in the cave, that's someone who actually believes that the Almighty is in total control over what's going to happen to them.
Shouldn't we strive for that, though?
To the best that we can. But for most people, some people try that, it didn't work. Why didn't it work for them? You know why it didn't work for them? Because they don't get that kind of treatment unless they're actually at that kind of level. So if they were to be in the cave and they were to have any hesitation at all, have any doubt, skepticism about whether or not breakfast was prepared for them in a barren wasteland, then they wouldn't have any breakfast prepared for them. And indeed, most people, they cannot live on the level of Rabbi Shimon himself. So, I think that we could say, in kind of conclusion, is that yes, it's not really a clear-cut issue. I think on one hand, we have to rely on God, of course. On the other hand, no one could say that we could ignore what it is that we need to do. Well, which one is it? Well, it's kind of both. There is this ideal that we have to be aware of, that it's possible to have some sort of complete dedication and commitment and acceptance and peace with the knowledge that God is in total control. And you know what? The more that you have that realization, the more that God's treatment of you is going to reflect that. So therefore, you actually don't need to rely so much. And the more worried you are, then the more worried you'll have to be. And, of course, like you said, Tom, that we have to constantly strive to improve and increase in the areas of faith that in our lives. That's what life's about. Well, how do we do that? Well, obviously, this ideal, we know we'll never reach men of complete faith. That's probably beyond our reach. But we can get closer. I don't know how close we can get, but we can get closer. Well, how do we get closer? I think, well, yes, of course. That's the one solution that helps in every area. I think additionally, besides the Torah study, you would talk about, we talk about blessings that we do. And what's a blessing about? It's a testimony to God being in total control and dominion over everything. It's essentially an act of complete faith. We may not be men of complete faith, but the more acts of complete faith we do, the closer we get. Fake it till you make it. Is that right? If you act with faith, well, then you become, that eventually permeates into to who you really are. So every time someone does a blessing, they are doing an act of complete faith. They are testifying that this is from God. You're about to eat, drink something, it's from God. You testify to that with a blessing. Mm-hmm. Now, whether you believe it or not, whether you really, really, really believe it completely, that's not necessarily abundantly clear. Who knows? Because you do thank the farmer, and we do thank the people that transport it. We do think about all the other steps in the way. We think about the plowing and the planting and the harvesting and the grinding and all that. But the act of faith brings me closer to faith. It's maybe a good place to start. Where we could maybe try to edge a little bit closer toward this ideal of having more complete faith and more reliance on God. And you know what? God will in turn also take more of the burden of what it is that we need to do in life.
I like that idea that it's a continuum. So maybe definitely we're not men of complete faith. So we're not at that 100% and 100% reliance, but the closer we can get, the more is provided and afforded.
Yeah, and isn't it nice to try to unload all your hassles on God? Wouldn't that be great? Amen. And the closer we get, the more we can offload.
I like that idea.
So that's the idea, guys, and I think it's still a thought-provoking discussion because there's still a lot of there's still a lot to think about in a lot of different areas in life. We talked a lot about finances and health and those kind of areas, but I think really every area of our material and physical life, maybe even our relationships, our careers, our professional lives, what happens to our foundation. Houston's worried. We haven't had rain in a while. What's going to be with our foundation? I hope my air conditioner doesn't break. You know, these are all these minutia of things that could go wrong in our lives. You know, and prayer. Well, what's prayer? What is prayer? Prayer is like blessings on food. It's an act of complete faith. We say God is in total control over our health. Well, you know what? If we really believed that, He would be in total control over our health. We wouldn't need to go to the doctor. Ideally, we don't need to go to the doctor. You know, but we don't really believe that, so therefore, we do need to go to the doctor. However, if we did believe that, we wouldn't need to go to that. And the more we don't believe it, the more we do believe it, the less we have to go to the doctor. Because the more God is indeed in control of our health. So as I'm saying, it expands to really every area in our lives. So I think it's a good thing to churn over. I would say if you want a takeaway point, I think it's a good takeaway to try to have this recognition and this awareness, to try to develop and further the awareness of the fact that God is in total control, and to try to edge a little bit closer towards this grand ideal of complete faith. Will we get there? No. Just because the job doesn't get done, it doesn't mean that it's not our responsibility to do as much as we can to try to get there. Right? As it says in the Mishnah, in Chapters of the Fathers, our responsibility is not to finish the job, but we're not free to absolve ourselves from it. So our life is going to be, like you said, a continuum or a progressive march towards complete faith. We know we'll never get there, but the closer that we get, the closer we get to God, and the better off we are in this very important and central realm in our lives. So that's that, guys. Wonderful as usual. And is any comments or questions anyone wants to contribute? Go ahead.
The first time that Tom said that God was sort of above time, I thought of like a glowing holy TARDIS.
A glowing what?
Holy TARDIS.
TARDIS? What is a TARDIS?
Have you ever seen Doctor Who?
No. What's
Okay,
Doctor Who?
it's the time machine that the Doctor uses.
Interesting.
First thing
So-
I thought of.
Very interesting.
Well, what is did you say a tortoise or a TARDIS?
TARDIS.
I'm sorry, I don't know what that is.
Time and relative dimension in
In space.
Oh. Some crucial pop culture that I'm missing on. This is a movie or this is a television show?
TV.
TV show.
I'm sorry, I don't have a TV. So
For real?
for real,
It's on Netflix.
That's fantastic.
I don't have Netflix either.
That's fantastic.
Even though, from what I understand, no one really has Netflix. Everyone just uses someone else's account. The actual original account owner hasn't been found. Doctor Who. Well, you gotta check it out. TARDIS. But actually, no, it's not TARDIS because it's not a time machine. God doesn't need a time machine. God's existence
Yeah, it's
is
just
not
the
limited
first
to.
thing that popped in my head.
Okay, cool. But God's existence is not limited to time. Therefore, you don't need a time machine. And remember, we're not in it if we really understand it. We don't understand it. We cannot understand such an
Of course
existence.
not, 'cause we only live in time.
So that's that, guys. Lots of fun as usual, and look forward to seeing you not this week, maybe next week. We'll
I'll
see.
confirm.
Look forward to emails. And if you don't have emails, just text the other number that ends in 76. Okay, everyone.